This is CNN.
Howie Kurtz, the interview you just had with Dan Rather, some very compelling stuff. I could just see some of his critics out there taking notes when he said about the issue of the flag or ribbons on the lapel. Dan Rather saying it doesn't feel right for me. I think he said it something like that twice. Is he going to be hammered by those traditional Rather haters out there for saying that?
Perhaps by a few of them, Wolf. But I think it's important to understand that journalists are just as patriotic as other people. They love their country. They feel very strongly about what's happened here. But many of them, Rather included, don't feel that they want to wave the red, white, and blue on the air, that that's not part of their journalistic mission. The other point I wanted to pick up on is, this 89% approval rating for the media in this Pew Research Center poll. I think that's going to fade very quickly because I think we're heading for a collision, Wolf, between the Bush administration and the press. White House, Justice Department, Pentagon reporters telling me it's getting very hard to get even basic information out of the government on this story. And as you well remember from the Gulf War, when there's a fight between the government and the media in a time of war, the public overwhelmingly sides with the government.
I remember that very well. Howard Kurtz of CNN's Reliable Sources and the Washington Post, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
And let's check some of the latest developments now in America's new war. A source tells CNN President Bush this weekend could sign an executive order targeting specific terrorists and terrorist organizations around the world. Mr. Bush is at Camp David this weekend. The United Arab Emirates today dealt a blow to the Taliban rulers in Afghanistan. The UAE broke off diplomatic ties with the Taliban over their refusal to turn over Osama bin Laden, the prime suspect in the terrorist attacks on the United States. Pakistan apparently will be rewarded for its assistance in the U.S.-led battle against terrorism. Senior State Department officials and diplomatic sources tell CNN the Bush administration could lift economic sanctions against Pakistan as early as Monday. At the site of the toppled World Trade Center towers, recovery efforts go on. Rescue workers still express hope they will find survivors in air pockets that may still be in the rubble. In Atlantic City, New Jersey, tonight's Miss America pageant will go on despite the terrorist attacks on the United States. The attacks did cause the unprecedented cancellation of last night's Miss America parade for security reasons. Joining us now by telephone is the pageant spokesman, John Healy. He's in Atlantic City. How concerned were you, Mr. Healy, about security for the Miss America pageant?
Well, Wolf, we took every precaution possible. Once the women arrived, they arrived here safely, and on Tuesday morning, when the bombing occurred, we got together, we spoke with them, we spoke with our board, and we decided it was unanimous among our board and on a 2-to-1 vote by the contestants that we move forward. And we've taken every precaution to ensure their safety as well as the safety of the 12,000 people who will be in our arena tonight.
Major League Baseball, the National Football League, they're back in business this weekend. Was there any concern that it might not be appropriate to have a Miss America pageant at this sensitive moment?
Well, Wolf, it was difficult because we had to make our decision within about 24 to 36 hours and had to project about a week and a half out. And certainly we have adjusted our telecast to reflect the mood of our country. You'll see tonight, as it airs on ABC at 8 p.m., that it's going to be much more patriotic, much more akin to the mood that we're feeling in the country. And I think most importantly, the most significant change we've made in this year's telecast is to work with the United Way to raise money for their September 11th fund. There will be several appeals during the telecast where our viewers can either call in or go to their website and make a donation to the September 11th fund. And all of the money raised tonight will go to the victims and their families and the communities affected by this terrible tragedy in our country.
John Healy, a spokesman for the Miss America pageant, joining us tonight from Atlantic City. Thank you very much. Good luck tonight. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll join the Capitol gang here in Washington. Stay with us.
This is Gordon. He is an actor in a clam suit. Gordon is quite content with his job here today. And why not? He's paid rather handsomely and need only swim merrily about. Swim, Gordon, swim. But could he not do better? What about Shakespeare or a miniseries? No, he has instead settled for this. Now, what does he have to do with you or your job? Only this. Are you truly happy as a clam? Or are you, like Gordon, just a person in a happy clam outfit?
Post your resume now. Monster.com.
You the monster.
It's easy to take electricity for granted. A lot of us aren't even sure where it comes from. So we're sometimes surprised to learn that over half of the electricity we use comes from coal.
Mrs. Windler!
And thanks to a $50 billion investment in clean coal technologies by America's electric utilities that use coal, it's getting cleaner every day, helping us protect something we can't take for granted: our environment.
When we were deciding where to build this plant, we wanted quality of life and plenty of electric power. This area is real nice, but the electric co-op is pretty small. Not a problem. They're part of this group of over 500 co-ops nationwide, Touchstone Energy. Our co-op worked with us to make sure we got the right power and the right price. So we built the plant.
Photos of the alleged hijackers, says Attorney General John Ashcroft, in hopes of generating more leads.
This is another step in what, in effect, is part of a national neighborhood watch. We've been receiving tens of thousands of tips from across the country as individuals have provided for us information valuable to this investigation.
There's just one catch. The FBI is not 100% sure all the photos match the names on the list. The use of false names or passport photos is still a possibility.
Well, I think we are fairly certain on a number of them. But you will see in the packages that we put out that we have not indicated those that we are certain on, in the hopes that we will obtain more information that will assist us in making an absolute positive identification.
These are the faces of the men the FBI says hijacked American Airlines Flight 11, which crashed into the first World Trade Center tower. 5 hijackers in all, one very key player. Mohammed Atta, possibly the pilot. He studied in Hamburg, Germany, with 2 of the suspected pilots of other flights. Intelligence sources say he was observed meeting with an Iraqi intelligence agent in Prague, though it's not known what was said. 5 more faces from United Airlines Flight 175, which hit the second tower of the World Trade Center. The key player, investigative sources say, Marwan al-Shehi. He studied in Hamburg with Atta and attended the same flight school at the Venice airport in Florida. On American Airlines Flight 77, which crashed into the Pentagon, an ominous connection. Khalid al-Midar. He was observed last year meeting with a man in Malaysia who authorities suspect was later involved in the bombing of the USS Cole. And on Flight 93, which crashed into Pennsylvania, the government named 4 hijackers. Investigators believe passengers wrestled with these men for control of the airplane to prevent them from crashing into another target. The probable pilot? Ziad Jarrah, who got his flying license in Hamburg, where he studied at a technical university there. Some of the hijackers, according to FBI Director Mueller, may be related to one another. And he said one or more of the suspects had contacts with Al-Qaeda, the network headed by suspected terrorist Osama bin Laden. Along with finding any possible associates of these men, the FBI says its main focus is on preventing any future attacks.
It's fair to say we're under a heightened state of alert, and without any specificity as to a particular target, a particular place, or a particular time.
The FBI says it's pursuing more than 200,000 leads and that more than 300 people remain in custody for a variety of reasons. Robert Mueller is going out of his way to say the FBI is playing by the rules when it comes to detaining anyone questioned in relation to the case. Greta?
Kelly, any update on the hazardous materials license investigation?
Well, actually, 18 men so far, Middle Eastern men, have been arrested in connection with trying to obtain so-called hazmat licenses. 3 states, though, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Michigan. Now, 3 of those men have been released on a $10,000 bond, but under very heavy restrictions. For example, they have to stay in their house under curfew from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. None of these people, though, Greta, has been connected at all to the terrorist attacks on September 11th. And there are 2 more men that the FBI is looking for that also, they say, received fraudulent hazmat licenses.
Hate crimes, an investigation?
90 separate investigations into hate crimes in the United States, at least according to the FBI. 2 people were indicted, one man in Salt Lake City, Utah, who is charged with attacking a restaurant with explosives. And another man in Seattle has also been charged with attacking a mosque there. So it's something that the FBI is very concerned about. It not only is a problem on its face, but it's also draining resources.
All right, Kelly Arena, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Remember the old recruiting poster with Uncle Sam pointing and the words, "I want you"? Well, right now, Uncle Sam wants you to start flying again. President Bush himself was sending the message today. At Chicago's O'Hare Airport, the president did everything but say, it is your patriotic duty to fly somewhere.
When they struck, they wanted to create an atmosphere of fear. And one of the great goals of this nation's war is to restore public confidence in the airline industry, is to tell the traveling public, get on board, do your business around the country, fly and enjoy America's great destination spots, get down to Disney World in Florida, take your families and enjoy life the way we want it to be enjoyed.
The president is doing more than cheerleading. He has a whole plan to beef up airline security. In the short term, President Bush wants National Guard units to provide security at 420 airports around the U.S. He also wants to establish a $500 million fund to strengthen cockpit security. Long range, President Bush wants federal management of airport security and screening services, and he wants to expand the federal air marshals program. Is all this enough to make you feel safe? Let's ask someone who flies for a living. John McCorkle is a flight attendant for a major airline. We're not going to name it. He's a member of the Flight Attendants Union. John, your view of security since September 11th?
Well, Greta, there's 2 things I can tell you. Number 1 is that security is obviously beefed up. Number 2 is that it's the same people performing the same jobs. So I don't know what degree you're going to be satisfied. There has to be some kind of federal intervention, I think, and I think the government's going to have to eventually take over security, because what we have now just isn't adequate, and we've seen security breaches already in Atlanta and Philadelphia just within the past week.
Okay, identify the problem. Is it the people who are actually conducting the searches, or is there another problem?
I think it's the people that are conducting the searches. You don't want to cast a broad net over everyone who does it, but certainly you could ask any crew member or anybody who travels frequently. There's probably a great percentage of, well, depending on what airport you go through, you're probably going to feel more secure, less secure. I think Philadelphia needs some work. I know personally, after the events of September the 11th, Boston could use some work, and that's just what I've dealt with.
What do you mean by Philadelphia? John, why is it that you say Philadelphia and Boston? What is it that stands out in your mind that those 2 airports need work?
I can tell you that in Philadelphia, Greta, maybe within the past year, there was a background check on many of the people who work for the company that is contracted to do the security there, and quite a few of the people that are in charge of screening baggage had criminal backgrounds. In terms of what I saw in Boston, I was actually here the morning of the attacks. And my crew finally left on a Saturday night. They were in uniform, IDs were visible, their bags were hand searched. They had things such as nail clippers, scissors, tweezers taken from them, corkscrews. I ended up leaving the next morning, Sunday morning, through the same security checkpoint. I as well was in uniform with my ID visible, and my bags were not searched, and therefore nothing was taken, and I had those very same items. So
John,
there's a discrepancy.
John, if it's so bad, why do you get on an airplane?
Well, I don't think that anybody can ever tell you to a degree, 100%, that they're totally safe or that they feel totally safe going through any particular security checkpoint. You're just, we have to fly. Americans want to fly. I have to go to work, and you just hope that people are doing the best that they can. But as we've seen, with security being beefed up, all across the nation. The fact of the matter is that a gentleman in Atlanta was able to get through security with a gun. The fact of the matter was a gentleman in Philadelphia was able to get through security with box cutters. So there are problems. No matter how much window dressing the government puts on the security issues at the airports across the country, there are still security breaches. And as long as there are security breaches, we've got a problem in this country.
Okay, you've identified, I guess, at least as much as I follow you, you've identified the problems relating to passengers and flight attendants boarding the aircraft. What about ground crew and maintenance? Are you satisfied there's enough security done to make sure those people are doing their job as they should?
No. As far as ground crew, I know I can speak in certain airports. Some of the employees are not screened at all. They're allowed to enter the airport areas, the operational areas, without being screened. And they therefore can carry anything they want to in a secure area. In other words, you could have, whether it be mechanics or utility workers or whatever, they simply just swipe their badge and walk through a door. And once that door is open, you could have 10, 15, 20 people piggyback in. But the point is that they're not screened. Whatever they take in is not screened. And that's a big problem as far as I'm concerned. And I think that anybody that works in a critical area, anybody that can have access to the airplanes, has to be screened, employee or not, in terms of the airlines. But anybody, whether they work in catering, the security people themselves, they have to be screened in order to get into an area where these airplanes are accessible. Because once they get past that area, they simply just walk up a flight of steps adjacent to the jetway, and they can place anything they want on board an airplane.
All right, John McCorkle, flight attendant, thank you very much for joining me this evening.
Thank you, Greta.
When we talk about airline security, you probably think of big jets and mile-wide airports, but a lot of Americans fly commuter and regional airlines. Do smaller planes and smaller airports mean smaller security headaches? David Fink should know. He is CEO of Pan American Airways, which is based in New Hampshire. His airline has banned virtually all carry-on luggage. David, why have you banned all carry-on luggage?
Well, I think the main idea was to put our passengers at ease and also put them through the screening process with a lot less hassle and a lot faster.
David, are you finding that your planes are filling up since September 11th?
We are gaining back traffic right after the 11th. That week we dropped over 55%. I guess today we're off around 30 to 35%, and it's gaining.
What type of aircraft does Pan Am fly?
We fly 7.2s at the present time, and what we do are at what we call metro convenient airports. We don't have basically the problems that you have at your large airports, Logan or O'Hare. We try to give people free parking. We're in Pease, and we're in Gary, Chicago, Mid-America's St. Louis, Sanford, Orlando, which are right outside the metropolitan area. It's a lot easier probably for us to control our access and screening than it is for your major airports. And we have our own employees do the screening.
David, from what I understand is that you still allow carry-on books, diaper bags, and purses. Is that right?
Yeah, that's basically it. Yes, and wallets.
I got to tell you, David. I bet if I wanted to smuggle a gun on a plane or a knife or a box cutter, I could do it in a diaper bag, a purse, or maybe even squashed in a book if I want to. So why the ban?
Well, I think number one, I take exception with what you're saying. I think right now the airline industry is probably the safest it's ever been in my lifetime. I think you're going to play a real runaround that you're going to put a knife or anything else past our screening people. They're our own employees, and they're very good. I beg to differ with you.
But the whole idea is that you don't have a total ban, you have a partial ban if you're allowing those items on, right?
Well, I guess that if you're into semantics, basically people put suitcases, carry-ons, and so forth, and what we decided that, and the people want it. Anything that has to do with safety, they're just very, very much in favor of.
Are you in favor of guns in the cockpit, or you think that's a bad idea?
I'm not a gun man. I think we have enough guns, but that's my own personal opinion. I think the pilot has enough to do to fly the airplane without getting involved in that.
What about reinforcing the door into the cockpit? You think that's a good idea?
Well, if that makes people feel more secure, I don't see any problem with that. I think, but you've got to stop them before they get there. I think that if we don't come back and eliminate the intrusion, whether it's into the plane or into the airport, that's your problem. And I think we're starting to address it. Certainly there's breaches, but I think right today, if you go to Logan, if you go to O'Hare, it's 90% better than it was on the 11th. I know we're 90% or 100% better, just no question about it.
All right, David Fink, CEO of Pan American Airways, thank you very much for joining me this evening.
Thank you.
Investigators have shown us their faces, but we still do not know if all the suspected hijackers on September 11th knew they were on suicide missions. Obviously, some did. What were they thinking? Next on The Point, inside the mind of a suicide terrorist.
I remember 20 years ago how they turned the racing world upside down. First by introducing a race car with quattro all-wheel drive, and second by having a woman drive it.
One energy company had an idea to build an ultra-deepwater drill ship capable of drilling nearly 2 miles below the ocean's surface. And last year, that ship struck oil. Conoco, think big, move fast.
If you suffer from heartburn caused by acid reflux, get Gaviscon. Gaviscon tablets become smooth and creamy, forming a soothing protective barrier that helps keep acid down. Gaviscon, relief from acid reflux without a prescription.
CSFB Direct. Direct access to 6 leading independent sources of research and to the top-ranked Credit Suisse First Boston analyst reports. That's the difference between online trading and direct investing from CSFB Direct.
With all our hearts, the people of Jamaica reach out to the people of America. We proudly stand with you in your determination to prevail. And we pray for the day when people everywhere come together.
One love.
One love.
One heart.
One heart.
Let's get together and feel alright.
The complete.
Did each of them know he was going to die? Investigators are still trying to understand the mindset of the 19 hijackers. But suicide attack is a common form of terror in the Middle East. Suicide missions were pioneered by the militant Islamic group Hezbollah. It used them to drive the U.S. and Israel out of Lebanon. CNN's Mike Betcher spent time in Lebanon last July, and he offers some insight into the motivation, even family support, given suicide attackers there.
This feeling cannot be described. It's a feeling of pain.
Ali Ajmar is preparing himself for the last day of his life.
This exists in every person, of course, but you have to shake yourself a little bit to find it.
Though he's barely 20 years old, he already knows how he is going to die.
Some people like us, they get what they ask for quickly. With a little patience, they get what they want.
He was a Lebanese Hezbollah guerrilla. In 1996, he strapped his body with dynamite and blew himself up beside an Israeli military convoy. What you are watching is a Hezbollah-produced videotape montage that tells the story. Westerners would call Ali Ashmar a suicide bomber. Hezbollah calls him Shaheed, a martyr. After he died, his father Munif said through his grief he was proud of his son's act.
أول شيء أشعر بالفخر والاعتزاز.
I feel that I'm honored. I feel the glory. I feel the pride. I'm proud of this martyrdom of my son.
Munif was visited by Hezbollah dignitaries.
بعد قليل من هذه الكلمات.
And Ali's videotaped last words instructed his family to receive congratulations instead of condolences. Although Hezbollah has not been linked to the September 11th attacks, both Western and Middle East intelligence agencies believe it does have ties to Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda. Both groups have effectively used suicide attacks in the past to further their objectives. Last July, Hezbollah agreed to give us an inside look at the tactic it calls martyrdom. The streets of Hezbollah-controlled suburbs of Beirut are decorated with the portraits of these martyrs. Face after face of young men who killed themselves for the resistance. They are considered heroes, and the families they leave behind are treated with respect in their communities. An encouragement for new fighters to follow in the footsteps of other suicide bombers. Like Salah Gandour, who left behind a wife and 3 small children when he too stormed an Israeli army convoy. I talked to his family.
I knew he was a resistance man, but before his martyrdom he told me, I will carry out a martyrdom operation.
Did you tell him, no, I don't want you to do that?
No, when I married him I knew he was a resistance man and I knew his destiny, that he would defend our land and our honor. I didn't prevent him from doing so.
Salah's son, Mohammed, speaks a bit of English. When you grow up, do you want to become a martyr too, just like your father?
Yes.
Why are you so willing to do that? You're just a little boy.
To kill our Zionist enemy and drive them out of our land.
You think you will see your father someday?
Yes.
Where? Jannah means heaven. Fighters performing suicide missions in the name of Islam believe their sacrificial act puts them on a direct path to heaven. And that after they're gone, their families will be taken care of.
You are leaving your kids, you are leaving your family, father, mother, and your nation, and we will take care of that. This is the importance of this point. How we build up his faith.
It's a concept that's very difficult for many Westerners to understand. Why is that?
I guess that in the Western society, they went through materialism more and deeply. And they left a short space for the relation with God.
Qasim Alaik is the general manager of the Shaheed, or Martyrs Association. It is a network of services that provides for the families of martyrs. They're given housing, an income, subsidized health care, and education. Knowing a social safety net is in place bolsters a fighter's commitment to the cause. A key ingredient, Hezbollah says, in a fight waged against a superior army backed by a superpower.
Our important army against our enemy is faith itself. We didn't have good equipment, sophisticated equipment, backed by superpowers or no. We have this human being who have this moral and faith army.
The potency of these professed acts of faith and of war is echoed over and over again on Hezbollah's Al-Manar TV. Naif Krayam, Al-Manar's chairman of the board, showed us around the machinery of the psychological battleground. Hezbollah videotapes its military operations, and they are broadcast widely to the Arab world and into Israel, encouraging new recruits, they say, and discouraging their enemy.
Sometimes the media is a more important weapon than the real weapon. Without the camera, without the TV, the resistance operations would not have had as great an impact and influence in the conflict.
An impact created by magnifying what is already to some an incomprehensible act. In South Lebanon, a wartime prison has now been turned into a museum where Hezbollah tells its version of the war. It's partly devoted to Hezbollah's suicide attackers.
They will hang the detainee here.
An ordinary Lebanese man, Abdulatif Abdullah, was there for his fourth visit. I asked him to explain how a young man, barely out of his teens, could kill himself like that. He'd seen decades of war against Israel's formidable army, and to him the answer was simple.
There is nothing more human than a human who wrap himself, with bombs and go, because this is the only way. There is no plane, there is no tank, there is nothing. You have nothing, you have bare hands, okay? How can you fight those? So you wrap yourself with bombs, and you go to them and blow up yourself.
You're talking about commitment of a martyr, to take your own life.
Yeah,
to walk
take
in and
your
commit
own
suicide with bombs strapped around you.
Well, you call it committing suicide. I won't call it committing suicide, because you commit suicide because you don't value your life. But this person value his life. This person say, if I blew up myself in a tank, that's a big message to them.
A message delivered by human weapons. Martyrs to some, terrorists to others, laser focused on one objective: certain death. We were in Beirut this summer shooting this segment you just saw as part of a CNN Presents documentary called One Day Soon, about the potential of a terrorist threat against the United States. We were still working on that documentary on September 11th. Greta.
Mike, I heard all the people you interviewed talk about the glory and the pride associated with being a suicide bomber. What happens if someone has second thoughts and changes his mind? What does the community think of that person?
There is some shame attached to that, but the biggest fear, the way I would answer that, Greta, the biggest fear of a suicide bomber is capture, is to be in jail. That is the biggest fear of a suicide bomber, because he himself believes it brings shame.
All right, Mike Betcher, thanks for joining us. I will be right back with more on the fight against suicide terrorism.
Coming up on The Point. It used to be one of the world's easiest borders to get across. Not anymore.
They seem to be the crossings of choice for terrorists and criminals.
Will the big slowdown also stop potential terrorists from sneaking into the U.S. from Canada? We'll stop for some answers. And next, outthinking the terrorists. A Point panel that includes the former director of the FBI and CIA when The Point returns.
First, he says he wants me to build a secure, reliable photonic network with ultra-high bandwidth, so we can send terabit files between plants at warp speed. Then, he shows me where the new plant's gonna be. Oh, and says that's where I'll be relocated. He's insane. A remote photonic network? Okay, that's actually possible. But me move there? That's just crazy talk.
You can accomplish anything, even optical networking. Fujitsu, the possibilities are infinite.
The new 255 horsepower Infinity i35
with the most powerful engine in its class. Don't blink. More power, more grace, more I. The new I-35 from Infinity.
Stay with us for the latest reports as the story develops in America's new war. This is CNN.
What if you could earn your bachelor's or master's degree from a leading accredited university while you're at home? At University of Phoenix Online, you can earn your degree when and where you want via the internet. You'll learn from instructors who hold high-level positions in their fields, so they can provide valuable insight. You'll learn with other successful professionals, sharing experiences and exploring new ideas. You'll have access to an extensive online research library, and you'll earn a state-of-the-industry degree in business, technology, education, or nursing. Best of all, you can complete your degree in about 2 or 3 years, so you can start applying it to your career success. University of Phoenix Online, the intelligent way to attend class. Financing available. To learn more, call 877-386-GRAD or visit our website.
This is CNN.
Can we outwit suicide terrorists? Let's check in with my point panel. Mark Juergensmeyer is joining us from Atlanta. He is the author of Terror in the Mind of God, a book about those convicted or accused or terrorism like Timothy McVeigh and Osama bin Laden. In Boston is Juliette Kayyem. She runs Harvard University's Executive Session on Domestic Preparedness. She also served on the National Commission on Terrorism. And with me here in Washington is former FBI and CIA Director William Webster. Judge Webster, first to you. It seems like an impossible enemy, one who is willing to die. What can we do to fight someone who's willing to give it all up?
Well, I think the obvious first thing is try to defeat him before he can achieve his objective. We've seen and had experience with those who engage in self-immolation. They don't hurt anybody but themselves. Then we've seen the single terrorist who sets off the truck bomb. Well, most of the time, my experience and recollection is that those are remotely controlled, so the driver drove and got himself blown up by somebody else. Here we have something more formidable. We have someone who wants not only to take out an entire plane load of people, but to do enormously more destructive damage by turning the plane into a missile. We have to deny him the controls to make that happen. And that involves protecting the captain and his crew and the cockpit in better ways than we have, as well as being more on guard for people entering who might do that.
All right, Mark, I'm going to ask you to do the impossible thing. Take me inside the mind of a suicide bomber. Why in the world is someone willing to do that?
The people with whom I talked were all willing to give their lives for the struggle if necessary. And this includes not only Muslim activists like people who were involved in the earlier bombing of the World Trade Center, but also a Presbyterian pastor who killed abortion clinic staff in Florida knowing that he would be immediately captured and put on death row. So this is not a Muslim problem per se. But it involves people who are wrapped up in this extraordinary vision of a global war, a cosmic war. And they think that their role as warriors is going to make an enormous difference. It's going to be a turning point in global history. They feel it's going to make an impact throughout the world. And they've seen other instances have this impact. And I think one of the things, to answer your question, one of the things you can deny them is that sense, even before they do this, that they're going to be treated like global warriors, that their act is going to be dignified with global war. Rather, it's going to be treated as a criminal problem, as a person who is involved in an act of terrorism that doesn't deserve such grand and noble kinds of rhetoric.
Well, I can understand that, but Juliet, let me ask you in this. In Mike Betcher's piece, we had a father whose son was a suicide bomber, and he said that he feels the glory, the pride. I mean, it's sort of hard to defeat that sort of thinking when it's so noble in a culture to do that, to try to persuade someone not to do it.
Well, that's absolutely right. When death is not something to worry about, when you're not worried about dying, there's limitations on what we can do in response to
celebrities who are rallying up support.
Where were you when the events happened?
In New York. was invented.